Hey, welcome back. So today I had a tennis player come in today who was missing some shoulder motion, and he also mentioned that he was having trouble getting into his left side. So when he went through his forehand swing, he didn't feel like he had enough mobility to get into his left side. He was wondering if he needed to stretch his internal rotation and if he needed to stretch out his spine and his rib cage more to the left. The really interesting thing about this scenario and what we might want to consider is that stretching may not always be the answer. So when we went through his neuromuscular postural patterns, what we found was that his right rib cage was really internally rotated and compressed. So all of this right here was pulled down and compressed. Not only that, but his shoulder blade on the back was forward and internally rotated as well. So he had internal rotation of the rib cage on the front, he had internal rotation of the shoulder blade, and as a result, he had essentially used up all of his internal rotation on his right side. So there was no way for him to get more internal rotation with his serve, and there was no way for him to get more internal rotation through his shoulder as he came through with his forehand. The other interesting thing was that he felt like he couldn't get enough rotation. He couldn't get over into that left side with his trunk when he went through his swing. And we also found that his spine and his tailbone and even his pelvis were essentially positioned in such a manner that he had used up all of his left trunk rotation. So he was essentially living at the end of left rotation. There was nowhere else to go. So trying to stretch and get more left rotation through his trunk, through his ribcage, through his spine simply wasn't going to work and would probably make the problem even worse and eventually lead to an overuse injury. So we're going to go through two exercises that we did that essentially restored his ability to open up that right rib cage, find his left obliques, recover shoulder internal rotation, and regain all of that shoulder internal rotation as well as his trunk rotation to the left side so that he had the full excursion of motion into his foreswing. So let's get into this. Okay, so knowing which direction his pelvis and his tailbone and his spine and ribcage are pointing, now we can begin to unpack this. Now we can begin to unwind this and get him more centrated so that he can recover full range of motion and he has complete freedom of movement through that entire right side. So the first thing we did is we just gave him a neuromuscular postural grounding pattern. We determined through our testing, our assessment, that he was not grounded through his left side, through his left, basically ribcage and diaphragm, as well as his left, the left side of his pelvis, the left side of his pelvic floor. So we simply set him up in a left-sided grounding pattern. And so we're heavier on the left side through the left leg and through the left foot and heel. The left foot is back, and then the left hand is up against the door frame. So we're only pushing about a 3 or 4 out of 10 effort here. We want about 70% of our weight in that back, that left leg. And now, because we know that his right rib cage is internally rotated and compressed, and we notice that he's having a little bit of trouble finding his left diaphragm, we're going to facilitate that left diaphragm, move air over into the right side, and that was the first step to getting that shoulder freed up. So again, we get in a position. We're going to raise that right arm, get that sternum pointing toward the side that we need it to go toward, and we're going to breathe. Now, the emphasis here is on that left diaphragm. So we're going to breathe in through the nose, long, slow, silent inhale. Again, 70% of our weight through that left side. And we're going to exhale, long, slow, sigh through the mouth, and we're going to really emphasize that left diaphragm. Breathe in. So we gave him 5 breaths with a 3-second hold at the very end of every exhale. And then we went on to exercise 2. Okay, so for exercise 2, we're going to bring his thoracic spine, his rib cage, toward the other direction. Remember, the postural assessment that we did told us that he was already so far left through his thorax that he couldn't go any further, so we're going to bring him back the other way. We're also going to do that by stabilizing through the core by just getting a small foam roll, getting the knee and the shin bone on top of that foam roll. I'm going to press very gently down into that side, and we're going to bring the tailbone back the other way. We're going to point the tailbone to the left. So now, a slight rib grab, just take a couple of those fingers, put them right underneath that rib angle, and get relaxed. Make sure the head and neck are fully supported. Long, slow, silent inhale. Exhale. As you exhale, you're going to exhale and reach that shoulder very gently back toward you. Don't force anything. Take what your body gives you. What you're going to notice as you breathe, when you breathe in, your left side is now compressed against the floor, which means, remember before we talked about how he needed right rib cage expansion, so he's going to get that. And we're also positioning the shoulder blade further back on the back of his upper rib cage. So now we're just going to open all this up. We're going to fill all of this up with air, and we're going to take his spine and his rib cage back toward that right side, which is going to give him more freedom of movement through his forehand next time he plays tennis. Long, slow, silent inhale. Remember, I'm pressing down with my knee at about a 3 out of 10, stabilizing that core and holding that pelvis and tailbone in place. Breathe in. Should feel this side expanding. Breathe in. And maybe you want to come back to the beginning, to the starting position, and do another 3 reps. Maybe you want to do 3 sets. So again, that's kind of how we dealt with his mobility restrictions. And when we retested, he had full mobility, and his shoulder had recovered full internal rotation.